Welcome, Professor George Syrimis. I'm sorry to mispronounce that. And welcome to this online recording of with the topic on why Theodorakis matters. I'm Spyros Orfanos. I'm with NYU, and Professor Syrimis is at Yale University, where he's a senior lecturer in Hellenic studies and in comparative literature, and has also written on a number of matters with regard to the Greek poets, the modern Greek poets, and including has really given some serious thought to the music of Mikis Theodorakis. And given our topic, and given that this is the centennial anniversary of the birth of Mikis Theodorakis, 1925, on the island of Chios, although he always identified himself as being from Crete, he never denied being born in Chios, but always identifies himself as a Cretan, which has its own, I think, really very interesting elements to it. But maybe we could talk about it. This is meant to be a conversation, an unrehearsed conversation about Theodorakis and what he means to not just Greece or perhaps Cyprus, but also what he means to the rest of the world. I've said before in another context that he's quite well known in Europe and in certain parts of South America. But and a little bit in Australia and in North America. But it would be interesting to have this conversation, especially in the English language, because in the Greek world, there have been countless of very serious intellectual analyses of his work and what it meant. And so I thought it would be fun to do something in English with persons such as you, George, and also with a couple of other people like Gail, Stephanie Merakos, Asteris Koutoulas. So that's what we're up to. So eh, might you say a few words as to when you first became conscious of Mikis Theodorakis and what that may have meant to you, and then we could veer off from that.
Yes, I think that's a good start to see how Theodorakis fits in anybody's life, especially, right? Not generally what it means for the country or I guess the music of the world, but rather how we each have a little Theodorakis story to tell, I think. So I want to thank you for this opportunity, Spiro, and also remind you that the interview you had of Theodorakis was close to 30 years ago, right? That I knew you were
Yeah.
taking with Susan at the time. So it's a good time to reunite and a good
Yes,
opportunity.
yes. I think it's a nice circle.
Yes. So uh, I guess everybody's experience starts with the memories one has as a child. And for me, Theodorakis was part of that kind of tableau of childhood that was there without having to pay special attention to him as a child. Remember, the memories I have of the music of Theodorakis have to do with the time around the Turkish invasion of Cyprus, the coup to overthrow Makarios, and how that particular moment in the history of the island was so instrumental in politicizing the consciousness of people like me, who at the time might have been anywhere between 5 to 10. So in 1974, when the occupation occurred, I was 8 and a half. And the rest of the children in the village, we knew what music somebody listened to, what newspaper everybody read, because we were kind of sensitized to these kinds of pieces of information. And the music of Theodorakis was something that constituted part of that lesson of entering into politics through this music. So I think there's a different Theodorakis in Cyprus, let's say, than there was one in Greece after 1974. The mood had almost reversed. So for us, the political music was still quite resonant and quite effective
Yes.
in moving and politicizing people, and even just having a sense of a political identity as I was entering also into puberty. So for me, it was foundational, I would say, in my
Yes.
life.
Yes, well, I feel quite the same myself. Theodorakis's songs were in the background when I was growing up in New York City, and they were on the radio. Back then, there was the only radio station
Mm.
was on at Sunday mornings in New York, and and then I became and they were interesting and very they were certainly engaging to my parents. But what I remember really learning was early in my adolescence. I was working in the family restaurants, and I remember people talking about Theodorakis' music, the workers talking about Theodorakis' music. I remember a wonderful short order cook from Kefalonia saying, admonishing me because I hadn't heard the Zorbas soundtrack and I didn't know what it was. And I listened to it and I thought, oh my God, this is like amazing music. What is this? And then I remember arguing with people late at night in the restaurant about what different songs meant. What exactly was Seferis trying to say with the song Denial, the poem Denial?
Yes.
And I actually found myself discovering modern Greek poetry, which I knew very little about, actually. Anyway, that was
No,
my.
no, that is actually fascinating to hear because when I was growing up, I heard very little of Theodorakis being spoken of among the villagers. So I'm
Mhm.
talking about a village of about 400, 500 people, not a huge village.
Yes,
So people didn't talk about music, especially music that might be political. Remember, I was growing up on the island at a time when Greece had a dictatorship.
yes, yes,
So for us, the national schism, if I were to call that, of the Greek Civil War, especially for children my age, would have been unheard of. I had not heard of Greek Civil War until I read Kazantzakis' Other Forefathers.
oh my God.
So I'm talking about near total silence on behalf of my family and the village itself, especially after the war, in admitting to these divisions
Yes,
on the island. So one of the things that I had learned as a child is one of the many things you learn as a child to kind of adjust to this situation is you kind of know who is who before people speak.
yes,
You
yes.
also know not to tell the teacher who, when I was there, we had a Greek teacher actually from Greece. So the suspicion was always that he's appointed by the dictatorship.
Mm.
So you don't talk about politics at school. You don't talk about the politics of your parents. You don't tell the school teacher what newspaper your father read.
Yes,
There were all
yes,
sorts of
yes,
knowledges and silences around politics that made it even more potent for us children.
yes.
So I think when I was when the war happened, um, there was still a resistance to being open about your personal politics.
Yes. Well, given the way people reacted to the political scene, very extreme, I can
Yeah.
understand that. And I think in my personal case, because this was in New York, and people were free to
Yeah.
argue in a certain kind of way, at least the workers in the restaurants that I remember. And they were really quite interesting arguments
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
about, and at that point I was learning more and more. And this was before the junta came. The junta
Mhm.
came in 67.
Yes.
So then, well, politics always, to me, always seemed extreme when talking with Greeks. And also there was I think the way you describe childhood as a psychoanalyst, I always understand language as being somewhat enigmatic, and there's a sort of an unintended mystification with language. Uh,
Yes.
and 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 of course poets, which I want to get into with you a little bit to talk about that, because what Theodorakis did or did not do with the poets, I think is very meaningful.
Yes.
And you've pointed out how he worked with while he was identified with a lot of poets, Marxist and leftist poets. They weren't the only poets that he used, and
Yes.
one wonders about that, what that means. And I think it has a lot of meaning. Anyway, I'm interrupting you. I just
Yes.
wanted
No, you're not. I
to.
think with regard to the poets, the big surprise for me is that he liked Gaddafi so much.
Yeah, but he didn't use Gaddafi too much.
No, no, I think it's because there's a different maybe tonality in Gaddafi that is very difficult to convey the subtle ironies that Gaddafi has, even though Theodorakis is very ironic in many, many songs.
Oh, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
and he has a lot of humor. It's not there is at least some similarity in the kind of the use of humor, but he doesn't. They don't seem to lend itself well to each other. The music that Theodorakis wrote, but I wanted to go back to kind of this question of childhood as well, and kind of depart from it. All the memories I have of Theodorakis are kind of part of that moment in history for me when Cyprus was essentially reliving the tragedy of the war, um, kind of in opposition to what was happening in Greece when you get the democracy coming back and people kind of moving away from politics into more, I would say, more kind of intellectual maybe or popular in the Western sense styles of music. So you get this a little bit of the cynicism of Savopoulos, for instance,
Yes,
uh,
yes,
didn't play as well in Cyprus as it did in Greece. We were not ready to abandon the battle because the battle had just begun for us.
yes,
I
yes.
think there's a different kind of history of the composers in Cyprus than there is in Greece. And for me, I mean, it all kind of closes, this sort of political period closes around 1984 for me when I went to the military and I could play epitafios over the speakers of the camp without any issue.
Mhm.
That would have been unthinkable for me maybe 6 years before or 4 years before. I remember
Mhm.
we moved into an apartment, one of these sort of refugee apartments that the government gave us. And I had just met somebody who was involved with the Communist Party. And,
Uh-huh.
they were trying to recruit us and have us, sell newspapers and things like that. And he had three albums, three vinyl albums, three greatest hits albums of Theodorakis, Markopoulos, and Xarchakos.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I had the double, he recorded the double Theodorakis one on a cassette for me. And I played the cassette at home. And my father walks into the room and says, "You probably should turn that down a little bit. The neighbors might be listening."
Wow.
And of
Wow.
course, in Greek, the term listen and hear is sort of the same verb. So I wasn't quite sure what he was. I was 14 at the time, and I wasn't sure whether he was telling me to turn it down because of the noise or because they could hear that I'm playing Theodorakis.
Yes, yes. Fascinating.
All right. So,
Fascinating.
so this was in 1980. By 1984, when I went to the military, the the politics had disassociated itself from the music and
Uh-huh.
the poetry.
Yes.
So I think for me, discovering him after, especially after I joined the military and during the military, was much more a kind of a turn back to Greek music, or rather a turn to Greek music, not even back to Greek music, because I want to remind also the listeners who were not born at the time how and where did you listen to music?
Yes. Well, I think the context is incredibly important. Not
Yes,
just the social or the cultural context, or even the aesthetic context, but certainly the political context.
but also yes, true, because the politics at the time for me defined not only what was I listening to, but how I was listening to it. But also, I want to make this point that you don't just listen to Theodorakis or anybody else at the time just because you wanted to.
Hmm.
There were no record players in Cyprus at the time.
Uh-huh.
I guess you could buy a little cassette or the big cassettes for the car, but we didn't have a cassette player. So essentially, to hear Theodorakis, it would have to be some song playing on the radio in Cyprus. I'm talking about a time when Cyprus only had only one radio station,
Huh.
right? In cinema, Theodorakis would occasionally appear, but not that often.
Hmm.
It usually would have been music from Elafrolaiko,
Yeah.
Mosoliou, Marinella. They would appear in the skits in the movies. So Theodorakis wasn't as much part of the soundtrack, except if it were his own, soundtrack of the music. But he wouldn't appear, his songs would not appear in this kind of little interludes that you have in the plot.
Yes, yes, yes.
So there was really very little opportunity to hear Theodorakis,
Mm.
even if we didn't have, well, we didn't have the censorship in Cyprus.
Yes.
So one's knowledge of Theodorakis was always, well, through the prism of the radio station in Cyprus at the time and the competition in radio hours that were available. Remember, in
Yeah.
Cyprus, private radio stations became legal in the 90s.
Hmm.
So I'm talking about the period of 70s to 80s. The only available music to me was what was playing on RIK, Ραδιοφωνικό Ίδρυμα Κύπρου, or what was playing on the British bases, the military bases, which was basically British pop music,
I bet.
the
Yeah.
charts. So
Yeah.
this was the horizon of musical encounters you could have.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you didn't own a record player, and I'm presuming even if you did own the record player, not all of the albums by Theodorakis might have been marketed as well or as widely as other music.
Yes. Well, it's
So
very interesting because Cyprus experience, which you're underlying, is was very different than the experience of mainland Greece. And in some ways, Cyprus' experience it may have been similar to the political sensibilities of the rest of Europe after, with regard to after the junta years, which was 67 to 74. Very interesting. Yeah.
yes, and I think internationally, both the Greeks and the international kind of opinion or media might have been a little tired of more Greek suffering. But you do have this reversal in 1974 where things are being normalized in Greece, but the situation becomes well, tragic in Cyprus.
Yes.
So
But
the music spoke differently. Um, so for us, and I guess me, as I was beginning to hear a lot more music, things resonated through Cyprus rather than Greece
yes,
when I
yes.
was a teenager.
Yes, yes. And I would link that to what you said earlier about how one listens to music, how the subjective experience, the subjectivity that one brings to the music, which is of course informed by the culture and the larger geopolitical issues. In fact, culture and the geopolitics in the more contemporary. Okay. In the more contemporary psychoanalytic way of thinking about it, saturates individual subjectivity. It just saturates it. It's very clear. I wanted to ask you because I think you know that one of my favorite essays is one that you wrote about Anagnostakis a few years ago and what that meant, the kind of shift that you point out that happens with Theodorakis, not quite. I'm reducing this, and this is not fair. Your essay is much, your chapter is much more nuanced than what I'm about to say. But there's a shift that happens for Theodorakis in his from a kind of an epic to a lyrical music and use of poets. Could you say something about that, or what's your current
Yeah.
thinking on that?
Um, the album we're referring to is Balandes with Zorbala and Pandis.
Yes,
This would have been the type of album by Theodorakis that I would not have heard at all when it first came out.
yes.
It
It's
just is
a
not,
different quality, very different
it
quality.
would not be the kind of music that was playing on the radio. Some of the songs are even longer than your average song
Three
playing on the
minutes.
radio. So
Yes.
I want to stress on this, the availability of Theodorakis and the non-availability of Theodorakis, because unlike, let's say, a band that you follow back then and you knew when they were having a new album out and you knew you were going to go and buy it, none of these things are applied in my slow um, acquaintance with his music. I really got to know his music, not in its completion, but near as much as I could find. When I went to Cornell, when I met Gail,
Yes.
I
That's Holst-Warhaft.
yes, that was
Yes.
also a big turning point for me in following Theodorakis. And I discovered the treasure trove that was her record collection. So I would borrow her records. My dorm had a record player and a receiver and a recording a tape player that you could all link. And so I copied all the music that Gail had at the time. So I met Gail in 1986. In 1986, I was 20. Perfect time for me to kind of switch over from pop music that I was listening to almost entirely in my teenage years to basically just discovering Greek music anew. And by discovering, I mean, I never listened to contemporary music in the sense of following Greek music that was contemporary of my times, but I was always maybe a decade or two late.
Mhm.
Or my favorite period was the period before I was even born. So in many ways, it was for me, especially after I joined the army, this attempt to kind of fill in the gaps.
Mhm.
Now, in the late 90s, I had seen Theodorakis live. I had seen him live with Hatzidakis, in fact, which, back in the mid 70s, they would still tour and come to stadia, football stadia. And I do remember this one concert where it was the two of them, Theodorakis and Hatzidakis, in the football field, and the politics of it was much more real in this context. That I would be in a stadium listening to this music. But I also want to stress that yes, Balandes was something that I discovered when I went to Cornell. So that maybe 10 years after the album was released, basically.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I was still immersed because the island was still kind of immersed in the politics. It still is immersed in the politics, into the epic mode of Theodorakis.
Yes. Yes.
So primarily because those were also songs that were more energetic and more on a major scale, most of them, even if they're sad songs. So there's an energy to them that I think lends them better to maybe um, day radio transmissions,
Hmm.
where you might have more sort of lively music
Yeah.
than such a meditative
Yeah.
album as Balandes. And I
Yes.
think
You
it's
see,
because
I just want to interrupt you just for a second. My experience was that the pre-Balades period for Theodorakis was so saturated with social justice and political justice issues, and that Balades, while informed by those social justice and political issues, was an introverted turn, very much into the interior. And I think he used the poet Anagnostakis in that way. It fit where he was, that Theodorakis was in a particular state of mind, of soul, kardia,
Yes.
that and that's where he could turn to Anagnostakis because that's what it allowed him to express.
Yeah,
Is
yes,
that
you're
fair to
right.
say?
Yeah, you're right. The crisis of poetry in the poetry of Anagnostakis is not unsimilar to the crisis of Greek music after 1974,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So the
Yes.
way that Anagnostakis is asking, well, what good is music? Is poetry?
Poetry.
Given this devastating history of the country. And I think, to his credit, Theodorakis was the first who came out in the early 80s to speak about the disappointment of the Papandreou years. The first one to come out, right?
Yes. Yes.
Excuse me, a double album with one for Anduri, Epivatis, and the other one with
Radar.
Galaras,
Yes.
right? With the same, I think, the same lyricist. So I think of those as kind of basically a double album,
Hmm.
kind of the first reaction to the Papandreou years. So to go back, I learned of this album when I went to Cornell, and of course I was mesmerized by the album. First because of the serenity of the melodies. The melodies are just gorgeous. They are the opening piece of Navajo, close
Shipwreck.
to, close to 2 minutes. The, intro the introduction of the song. So we're talking also about songs that are, in terms of their duration, longer, in terms of their scope, much bigger. Also, we have to kind of clarify here what we mean by lyrical, because Theodorakis had always been lyrical, even during his most political phases. I mean, I was listening to something I found on YouTube, was supposed to be rare recordings of Faraduri, and in some of those recordings that were done in the basement in Paris are very lyrical songs if you abstract the meaning of the lyrics.
Hmm.
So one of the ways that I also listen to the music, because I listen to the music here, not within a context where people understand the lyrics, I'm always kind of curious, and at this point in my life, because English is also like a first language to me, I don't have the sound of English in my mind. I don't hear English as a sound, the same way that I cannot imagine how Greek sounds to somebody who doesn't understand it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that is the kind of dual hearing you do when you listen to music with somebody who doesn't understand the lyrics.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's
And
very interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
go
No,
ahead.
it's interesting because it is often, and you mentioned it earlier, that sometimes the music seems in contrast to the lyrics,
Yeah.
to the and what I think Theodorakis always captures. Well, it's very. No, let me think. What I really want to say is that um, the Theodorakis never, as far as I know, never changed any of the words of the poetry that he was using.
No, he didn't. He may have used excerpts from a poem, not the entire poem.
Not the entire, but for
Yeah.
example, with Kavafis and the poem
Yes.
Polis, which he
Yes.
uses in
Yes.
Symphony Number 3, which is a gorgeous melody, but also it's one of introversion, right? It's one of self-reflection on and being alienated and not being able to find a place to belong, right? A country, yeah.
Um,
In the lyrics
I
of
also want to
Kavafis.
point out that at least the mode of Balandes is not entirely new for Theodorakis. He already had smaller collections like Lipotachtes.
Oh, absolutely,
That
absolutely.
also appeal to a different kind of audience. I don't think they're more for the stadium football stadium audience. They're more for like the theater,
Yeah, except
music theater.
the interesting thing is a few of those songs, right? Omorphipoli and Hafika, right? Wound up in the common um, repertoire of
Yes,
even popular. I mean, that's what's so amazing to me. Of course,
yes. I
based on
would
the poetry of his brother, Yanis
yes,
Theodorakis.
I would say those are for a different audience than the more popular ones.
But you hear them all the
You
time,
do, you do.
all
They're
the time.
actually they're very very popular, and actually sung by other singers. Some of the most uh, uh, some of the songs by Theodorakis that other singers have recorded consistently.
Yes, yes, I think you're
Some of his
absolutely right.
most reinterpreted songs. But I want to make a pause here. How everything also ties into biography again. Um, in
You
the
sound like a psychoanalyst.
well, at this point, I'm getting at the age point in life where I'm talking about points in my life, right? Because I mean, I don't know if how original the idea was of this switch to the lyrical. It probably also had to do with the way that I was listening to him at the time. If you remember in the early 80s, 82, 83, everybody was talking about crisis of Greek music. There's a
Yes, yes, yes.
crisis in Greek music. So everybody knew that we had to kind of move away from Rebetiko at some point, you know. And I think Sarkakos gave us the permission with his album Rebetiko,
Rebetiko, yes,
you
and the
know, the
movie.
swan song of Rebetika, a classic masterpiece. And I think that was it. We were done with
Yes,
this more kind of renaissance, let's say, of Rebetiko, which I think was a needed moment, maybe to take stock of the country's musical
yeah.
traditions right after 74. And you have these two great singers that show up, Dalaras and Alexiou, that dominate
Yes,
and have the best albums of all Rebetika music. Um, so at this moment of crisis, I remember distinctly that both Theodorakis and Hatzidakis brought out new recordings of old songs of theirs.
yes,
The Hatzidakis were the two Agores, Laiki and Romaiki Agora, with a new orchestra, the Orchestra of Colors. And at the same time, Theodorakis also brought out two double albums. I think they were called not uh, let's sing of them as sort of the greatest hits of Theodorakis, but sung by the singers of the period he was using, Kayaloglu, particularly,
yes, yes, Aliki.
right? And Faranduri also sang, but it was old songs of his with an orchestra.
Mhm.
And this is the early to mid 80s when Greece was finally, I don't know, getting some semblance of
Yes,
an orchestra that was not entirely for classical music. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because you already have in Balandes, which came out in, I believe, in 74, um, a lot of uh, overlap with the musicians that Hatzidakis is using. So if
hmm,
you look at the musicians that are playing on Balandes by Theodorakis, they're almost the same musicians that Hatzidakis is using.
yes, yes,
And part of the reason I think that Theodorakis was usually using the term lyrica, much more often at the period is partly also a reaction to what we have been, I think, misleadingly been reading throughout the years that there's this Theodorakis side and the Hatzidakis side.
yes. Well, that was a dichotomy that was probably good for the newspapers and
Yeah,
the political.
and for a while it was productive, but not really in the
Yes, yes, because in fact they knew each other, and Stephanie Merakos, who was the archivist at the Megaromusikis, the archive, the Theodorakis, she was directing the and organizing the archives for Theodorakis, points out that In the beginning, when they had met at communist youth movements in the 40s,
Mhm.
right? And they had Theodorakis, as we know, sent his first compositions, songs to Hatzidakis for recording, because Hatzidakis was sort of the prince of the Greek music scene at the time and doing fantastic work himself. Um, but yeah, that dichotomy, I mean, yes, I remember there were also the arguments of who's better, Pithekotis or Katsatsidis. I mean, they're
Yes,
kind of
yes, yes,
a
exactly.
black and, these binaries that were not working. And in fact, I would add that both Hatzidakis, and I want to mention that Hatzidakis is also being celebrated for his 100th birthday. It's his centennial year. But for various, I'm not quite sure, but for various reasons, the people that own his estate, his his uh, uh, his songs have not been performed as often or as frequently in concert settings as they might and as they deserve. But that aside, I think that their ability, especially for the Larakis, to challenge the dichotomy between high art and low art, uh, it seems to me to be an extraordinary achievement. Uh, and
Yeah.
to me, it's also, again, to mention something personal, um, that my uneducated parents, my father only went up to the sixth grade, and my mother didn't complete the second grade because she had to go to work in the fields. Um, they were singing Greek poetry in the late 60s and 70s. My mother, in fact, was singing Neruda because of the like. I mean, this is like astonishing. Uh,
Yes.
I mean, I know there were other poets around the world that were having their songs set to music. Schubert, for example, but that kind of popularity was just like stunning to me. Absolutely
Yes.
stunning. I don't know what you think of that. If you could say something about that.
At the time when I was growing up, I wasn't thinking about it.
Hmm.
It wasn't an issue because it was what it was, right? This is what Greek music was singing to poetry, and I have to say, for a child, that didn't resonate enough. That wasn't the reason that I liked the music.
Uh-huh.
Also, in my teenage years, before I got to read the poets themselves independently of the music, right? Because it wasn't just Theodorakis' music, it
Of
was
course.
everybody else, and even Hatzidakis was using
Hatzidakis,
poetry.
many
Even
others.
yeah.
Leondis.
So for me, it was all filtered through my moment in history and my life, in the history of the island, the history of the left and the right. Um, Granted, there was no right-wing music when I was growing up.
Mhm.
The most right that the right could conjure up would be Hatzidakis, and I can think of a lot
Yeah.
more conservatives than
Yes, yes,
Hatzidakis, right?
yes. It's hard. Yes, yes.
So let's not exaggerate the options there. I mean, I don't think we can uh, hand over the left wing over to Hatzidakis entirely. It wasn't his responsibility, nor did he ever claim that he was writing from a specific political point of view. But that all of this music would have been one unity for me, and there would have been no difference between. And this is I think what was still fascinating for me is that I didn't really understand that Rognosini was the album about the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the Civil War is still something that I'm discovering
Mm-hmm.
beyond Adelpho Fathers by Hatzidakis in 1980. I would have been going to high school, which was actually an English high school, a private high school that my mother used to work there. So I was getting free education. Um, the Civil War was something you had to discover.
Yes.
You have to ask around people. I mean, in my family, I never heard of the Greek Civil War,
Huh.
right? My family was of the left wing kind of on the island. My parents were equally educated or uneducated as yours. So where would I go? I would have gone either to maybe somebody older than me. My brother didn't know what the Greek Civil War was about. My Greek teacher in the high school that I used to go, my teacher for Greek, who was Cypriot, and also an old fighter of EOKA, never ever mentioned to us the Civil War.
Yes.
And I think I was kind of in my very late teens when it kind of clicked together. So
Yeah.
the music did not speak differently. The songs by Elidis, the songs by Seferis did not register to me at the time the same way
Mm.
as different from the songs by Ritsos.
I see. I
And
see.
also because the Theodorakis was never really, uh, he was too big to fit in one box.
I,
Right? He was
I
too
like,
big to fit in one box. He was a communist at times. He was an internationalist, but I think he managed to ride the wave of nationalism as well, and make some of the most. And I'm not saying this critically because I think there's an overabundance of criticism of nationalism, and it deserves most of it. But I think in terms of art, nationalist art in Greece has been rather successful and quite. I mean, most of the stuff we read are about composing the nation, right? All the La Grafica.
yes,
So
yes.
I think in art, nationalism has given us a good stock of great works.
Yes, yes. But it's
Um,
very interesting because Theodorakis said has also been such an international
yes,
persona, such an international persona. And it's very clear that he's, or at least to me, it's very clear that he really enjoyed that. I mean, he loved identifying as being a Cretan, for example. He tells the story of once he's on the ground and people and the police authorities are stepping on him and they asking him to sign some kind of confession. And they say to him, "Why won't you sign the confession? Is it because you're a communist?" And he says, "No, it's because I'm from Crete that
yeah,
I won't sign the confession." I mean, which is a kind of very interesting kind of issue of the hero in his mind and trying to,
yes,
and where that came from. I wanted to ask you a few things about um, in his in his use of the different poets. Uh, um, in my way of thinking about things, he tapped different, not just different poets and different voices, poetic voices, but he tapped different aspects of himself. Because
mhm,
you're right, he does. You can't put him in one category. He started out life as a symphonic composer, and in a way, he ended his life as a symphonic. That was really what he wanted to do. He veered into Greek song for
mhm.
various reasons, and he, in many ways, enriched Greek songs, and people followed suit. And there were a number of people that followed after him, and he supported. And but what do you think about this idea of his different musical selves, uh,
Yeah,
and how that linked to the different? I mean, Ritsos is very different than Varnalis, or very different than Seferis or
Kariotakis is
Karaiotakis,
also.
yes, which he does. He creates a whole opera. Uh,
Yes. Maybe I should also frame my returning point, which is that there was a different Theodorakis at the time that I was growing up that I understood, a different Theodorakis from the one that was actively political in the 1960s that I was only very vaguely aware of. How would I know this? So a lot of my knowledge of Theodorakis is filtered through these also moments of ignorance. And
mhm.
so to go back to your original question, what makes Theodorakis relevant, what is pertinent, what is great about Theodorakis now today. Um, I think I want to kind of liberate a little bit the music also from a historical moment,
Hmm.
also from the ethics or poetic world that each album may inhabit, and that may be lost to audiences over time. But I think that is a gain for the music
Mm.
because then the music is heard outside the particular moment that made it resonate maybe more political than it does today. That there are different ways of listening to political music
Yes,
because it's still great music.
it
And I
is. It
think
is
this,
amazing
right, and
music.
this was the criticism at the time that Theodorakis was maybe sacrificing aesthetics for politics, which I don't think is true. I mean, you show me somebody else who didn't write about politics and wrote equally beautiful music. Um, and I think not even Hatzidakis can compare. And I want to make that distinction here, not so much because I like or subscribe to this topic of who's the best.
Yes, well,
I
that's
think
a
Gre- I
silly
think
question in many
I
ways.
think Greece has been very, very lucky, or the Greek audiences have been very lucky to have had two composers that appear to be so oppositional but also complementary to each other, that they can actually have quite a lot of overlaps. One of the things we tend to forget is that in the early years, they were sharing a lot of singers,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
And musicians, and some of the musicians, yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. So,
at the very first recording of Hatzidakis of Epitaphios with Nana Mouskouri, Theodorakis is at the piano.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's amazing.
So, but if you remember, you also used to have maybe a song that would come out, and then it's a Bithikotsis song, and then a few months later, Mushuri is singing it.
Yes,
So you
yes,
had already at the beginning these two singers singing both of them, and if you were to play those songs to somebody who doesn't know their history, you would not be able to tell,
yes,
not tell who
yes,
is who.
yeah.
And I think maybe the two of them realize this, that they maybe should step back from that overlap so that they don't essentially be writing the same songs.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a way, they certainly it's easier to identify with Theodorakis, which is that it was an era where the composer was prominent and the vocalist was not the main. The vocalist was incredibly important,
Yes.
but in after the junta years, the vocalist became it. This is
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it's
No,
not
no, you're
fair.
right. This happens in the mid 80s to late
Yes, the
80s.
vocalists become prominent, and we admire and we admire Dallaras, we admire Fananturi, we admire, and of course Fananturi was instrumental, as was
Yes,
Pithikotzis. I mean, they
yes.
were incredible.
That generation,
Yes,
including also Dallaras, because Dallaras is also the most successful, I guess, of that generation of the 70s and 80s, um, are also singers that still sang within an old rubric of the triad: composer, lyricist, singer.
yes.
And but he was also one of the first to break that as
Yes,
well,
yes. Well, then the
right?
orchestrations became more prominent, the instrumentation became more prominent. But I really, really appreciate your insight. To me, it feels like insight that when the context, the historical context, doesn't seem so prominent 20 or 50 years from now, it will be the music that is prominent.
But it will have to be the music.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
it's the
otherwise
genius.
it cannot be his innovation of bringing poetry to music because we can read the poetry independent of the music.
Yes, yes.
So the music must stand independent of the poetry as well. And I think this is where we're not forgetting. We know that he was a great melodist. Um, he also has great songs that are not by the best of poets. and
Yes,
they're great
yes,
songs, right?
yes, yes.
They don't need to be, the lyrics do not need to be of that caliber for the songs to be great. I think there's a different standard in appreciating music. You can love a song that has mediocre lyrics, but you cannot love a great song that has great lyrics but mediocre music, right?
I think that's a wonderful way of putting it.
I think a song that has both great lyrics and great music is greater, but I think there are great songs that don't have
Yes.
great
Well,
lyrics.
Theodorakis has, I mean, I remember him telling me that when he wrote the song, which was originally in English, when he used the Gazzo lyrics for Anthimithis ton Irom, if you remember my dream, his fantasy, which is in many ways, it's a very romantic song of that era, right? Of the late 50s. It was used in a movie, I think. And he said, well, my fantasy, I'm paraphrasing him, my fantasy was that couples would be dancing. All over the world, they would be dancing to this song, right?
Yes,
I mean, that
yes,
was certainly not a political song. And
yes.
Katsos, who was also an incredible lyricist, right, for Hatzidakis, but also for Theodorakis, we forget that. And he also was a poet. Uh,
Mhm.
and it always struck me that that was another state of Theodorakis. So he could toss off a song uh, and while he's writing, a symphony and getting the piano prize in Moscow as he's studying classical music. So all these different sides, I very much appreciate what you said about you can't really put Theodorakis in a pigeonhole. You know?
Yes, and I don't think you can leave him also in the historical moment that he wrote. He cannot be left there.
Yes.
The future has to be, first of all, with new artists, right? New artists that reinterpret his music differently with different orchestrations. I think this is beginning now, and I think
Yes.
because he lived so long, I think when the composer is still alive, young people may be less prone to disturb the legacy of the hero, right? This is a
Yes.
a founding father of Greek
Yes.
music. Hatzidakis being the founding mother, right? So they're both together.
There we go, another dichotomy.
Yes, I know. Yes, the masculine and the feminine. But I think this is where Theodorakis is more innovating. No one else was doing epic. No one else.
That's right. That's right.
No one else was doing epic. It's not as if Greek music was overwhelmed by epic music. It was just one person and the rest followed,
Yes, yes, yes.
right? And so, and I mean, what would Greek music have been without this towering figure also of Maria Farandouri,
Absolutely. We can't.
right? I mean,
She's a remarkable persona in her own right and an extraordinary artist
yes, who
who
continues, but
continues
also,
not just her Theodorakis legacy, but her own in other ways. She continues to record
yeah.
interesting composers and so forth.
Is still around, and I mean, I don't think Theodorakis would have been the great Theodorakis that he is without Farandouri.
Yeah. But he also, in some ways, created her.
Yes,
Yes, I
but
mean she
yes,
existed as a wonderful vocalist
yes,
as an adolescent,
yeah,
but he told her very clearly, and she openly talks about this, that he chose her when she was in her late teens, that you will be my, well, I'm paraphrasing him now, you will, or paraphrasing Maria, you will be my high priestess or something along those lines.
yes.
Yeah.
And you know what he says? He says that she chose him.
That's, oh, I love that. I love that.
When he first heard her at some concert, and she was, I think, 17, he then went to say, to congratulate her. And she told him, I have been learning music to sing your songs.
Oh, I love
You
that.
are
I
right,
love that.
right?
But
After the first encounter, he wrote music for her voice,
specifically, oh yes,
right?
yes,
And she
yeah.
basically,
Yes,
offered her voice to his music,
yeah.
and we all benefited from it.
You see,
Um, And also, she also used to sing for Hatzidakis.
Hatzidakis, yeah, but that was a little bit later.
Right?
She
Yeah.
also felt that she always worried about her loyalty issues to Theodorakis, and that she felt a little guilty when she first started to sing the recording of
Right.
Hatzidakis.
Well, that she hasn't spent time at the Xeronesia, right?
Yeah,
No, Faranduri has paid her price more than once or twice. I think she's a great
absolutely.
speaker to begin with. I met Nena Venetsanu many
Oh,
years
she's
ago.
another great
Yeah.
interpreter of Theodorakis.
Yes, exactly. And I did ask her one summer, candidly, the two of us, I said to her, right now, the greatest voice in Greece is who but you? And being who she is, which is a real lady, she paused for a second and she goes to me, not as long as Faranduri is alive.
Ah, I love that. I love that. Well,
What a great thing to
you
say.
know what? One of the things that, and we're going to have to end. I just want to point out that what you described about, Fananturi choosing to sing Theodorakis and Theodorakis choosing to have Fananturi as a singer is in many ways a co-creation. It,
Yeah,
it's a co-creation. And I think that's what Theodorakis did so well, you know, and he co-created with Pithikotis. He co-created Romiosini with Ritsos. There was a
yeah,
way
yeah. I mean,
that there was
yes.
some third phenomena that happened uh, uh, that was had elements of both these individuals, Fananturi and Pithikotis. I mean, Fananturi and Theodorakis, Theodorakis and Pithikotis, but somehow there was a third entity that was created with them.
Yes, and Spiro, I will just say, I will remind us for one thing in that when we're talking about the 50s and the 60s and even the 70s, how many people are we talking about? How many composers are we talking about? How many singers are we talking about? I would say for composers in the 50s, 60s, basically, what, 50 people? 100 people? And how many singers of that level? Maybe 200 people? We're talking about a small community of artists who are all experiencing first of all, this wave of the 1960s, right? Worldwide.
Yes,
The
yes.
wave of the 1960s in Greece, especially. And you also notice that I think one of the saddest things of Greek music in the last, I don't know, 20 years is that we still have great voices. We just don't have a direction. We don't have the direction towards some new, I'm going to call it school of music or style of music, whatever it may be. But we don't have composers that stand up to the level of the voices. We still
Mhm.
have great voices. We don't have the great composers. I think back then everybody was lucky because you saw Markopoulos had two or three singers that were his own.
Yes,
Hatzidakis had his own. And I think all of these composers, what they also brought to music is they brought these new voices.
yes,
Everybody. Kraunakis obviously brought up Psalti, but he also brought out Manolis Lidakis. He also brought out uh, um, younger voices. I'm thinking now of oh, we both had him. We had him here last year, and you had him in New York recently, right? So these voices came out of the particular work of particular composers, right?
yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
Sometimes I wish we had albums, let's say, of Xylouris singing Theodorakis,
Oh, that would be
all
interesting.
right? But
Wow.
he was as
He sang
Markopoulos.
Sarhakos, though. He
Yes,
did sing
Markopoulos,
Sarhakos.
Sarhakos,
Besides
Markopoulos,
Markopoulos, of course. Yes.
this. So there were always these kind of little smaller niches within
Yes.
the
Well,
broader.
there was an extraordinary amount of creativity that
Yeah,
was happening, and I think, and I hate to put it so simply, but I think Theodorakis, the, his ways and methods and his gifts were such that he also opened up opportunities for others to experiment and to work the poets, to work with for example, he created the song cycle practically. He created concerts in Greece. He
He
took it.
made new forms of music. I mean, he had
Yes, yes,
the Τραγούδια Ποταμός, these open
yes,
songs that don't
yes,
have the structure
absolutely.
of. I mean, I think this is where he's. Maybe I'm going to put it in terms of numbers and not necessarily speak of quality, but in terms of numbers, Theodorakis still has the richest repertoire of all.
Yes. Well, yes,
Well, I
absolutely,
mean,
absolutely.
the
And that
type of,
is,
oratoria, classical music, popular songs, more, and I think we need to distinguish even of his popular songs, the ones that are done in like Gold style and the ones
yeah,
that are not.
the art
Yes.
songs.
So there's still such a diversity of works, even within
Yes,
one period of Theodorakis, right?
yes,
But
yes.
I
Well,
think that
I'm sorry.
the future must be somewhere beyond his history.
Mhm.
I think we can expect young people to go to Theodorakis because he was a big political figure and was a, a person of inspiration. That was what was for me and for you.
Mhm.
For younger generations, he has to be something different, and that's for each generation to discover. I had a colleague here until very recently. We're still very great friends, but we're kind of a generation apart.
Mhm.
So he's a much of the 80s generation of the Papandreou era, and that generation just cannot tolerate Theodorakis,
Mm.
right? And I can see they identify him with Papandreou because
Mm.
Papandreou used so much of his music in the
Yes,
rallies, right?
yes, absolutely.
Um, so one of the questions that this colleague of mine posed is because he likes heavy metal, and he asked me, so he said to me, where's the revolt in Greek music?" And of course, I have to remind this younger person, but still an educated person, that Theodorakis spent months and years in prison.
That's right. And
That's
tortured.
that's the revolt.
And tortured.
That's the revolt. It's not an aesthetic revolt. It's not a political revolt behind the desk, right?
Yes.
This is somebody who spent months and years in exile,
Well,
and
yeah.
that's the revolution.
He personified resistance
Yeah.
to the irrational authorities and the violent authorities. George, we need to end now. I need to end, although
Thank you.
I have a feeling we're going to be talking a lot in the future.
Yes,
Would
Spiro,
like that
maybe
very
we
much.
should do a little restaurant meeting and record it there in Greece.
What? In a cafeteria, of course.
Καφενείο, ναι.
Yes,
That's
it's
it.
too bad they don't have those cafeteria, those great cafeteria.
Listen, we have them here in New York. Maybe we can do them in New York.
Maybe there was once upon a time a couple of those, a couple of those. So, thank you very much for this. This is very enlightening. I've enjoyed it very much, and I'm looking forward to more.
Thank you, Spiro, and thank you for
Thank
this
you, George.
initiative as well. And I look forward to hearing the rest too.
Okay, nasa
Okay?
kala.
You
Yes,
have a
sir.
good
Be well.
afternoon. Bye bye.